Good morning, everyone. My name's Don C., and I'm an alcoholic. I also am a member of the Mohican Nation. Our nation was a matriarchal tribe, and that means that we had a clan system. So we had a number of clans that kept information about what was to be taught in the tribe. So I was born for the Turtle Clan on my mother's side, and what that means is on the top of a turtle there's 13 squares. Around the edge of the turtle there's 28 notches, and so that is where the story was told about the story of life. So shortly after baby was born, they would call a male and a female elder from our clan over, and they would first give that little baby, just maybe an hour old, they would give that baby to the female elder. And she would tell the story of how it was to be in our tribe for 3 cycles, or 12 years. A cycle is spring, summer, fall, winter. So 3 cycles were 12 years. Then when she was done, she would hand that baby to the male elder, and he would tell the story all over to the changing world time. And so the next day, as the mom would be getting the baby ready, she would tell a little bit of that story. Then the second day, she would tell a little bit more. And as that child grew, they tell that story plus a little bit more. So it was always being told the story of how it was supposed to be. And those babies also went through terrible twos. So it wasn't this perfect little Indian kid either. So they had terrible twos. But what happened was the parents did no discipline for the first 4 years. Who did the discipline was Grandma. She was the one that disciplined the baby because they didn't want to confuse the child having the parent give mixed messages. And so when that child would do something wrong, they'd go see Grandma. Go see Grandma. You know, it's like you guys go see your sponsor. So anyway, then Grandma, she would look at that child, and she would never say bad girl, bad boy. So there's a word in our language that talks about connectedness in the spiritual world, and how you describe that best is, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but as soon as you look at someone, their eye connects, there's a feeling goes across. And then you either smile, you acknowledge it, you can't see it. In our language, that feeling is called netashneha. We have a word for that. So Grandma would first wait to connect to that child, because that feeling is where transfer goes. Then, when she had that feeling between her and the child, then she would tell it how it's supposed to be, not what it did wrong. It was always being fed the corrective measurement for it. And so the elders, they always tell me that when you go somewhere, you tell about the clan that you're from, because if somebody from your tribe is in the same area and they would need these services, then they know that you are from their clan. And so our primary goal, idea was to give the story of life, and then we also did the naming ceremonies. So they would come to our elders and have the ceremony to give names, and that was a proper way I was taught to introduce myself. And so earlier I went out and we have this thing about offering tobacco. It's called tobacco is a plant that we use during prayer or gift giving. It's a thing that many of the tribes do. So the words that we use, we say, I put down tobacco. So I put down tobacco because I was taught to, when I go to somebody else's land, there were native people lived here long time ago. This is their land. And so I have to ask their elders permission to speak and to say I will conduct myself properly as a guest. And so I put down the tobacco to ask for that permission to share here today. And so let's see. I have 9 children, 6 girls and 3 boys. And out of that, I have 20 grandchildren and 1 great-grandchild. All my children are now sober. And my grandchildren, none of them drink or drug. They're all sober now. And it wasn't like that for a long time. I did a lot of damage to that family before I was able to come to you guys, and get things straightened out. So I would say I think I got sober. I wasn't trying to get sober. I didn't have a plan for getting sober when that happened. But I know that my relatives were praying for me, and that wasn't working, that I could tell. And I think God was involved, but I couldn't see any proof that happened. The proof that I saw happen is I was married at that time, and my wife at that time went to Al-Anon. I remember the weekend she caught on to what Al-Anon was about. Man, my life changed like you could not believe. Wow, it was a rough one. So I don't know if it was my relatives' prayers. I didn't see any proof of God, but that Al-Anon shit works. That's kind of what did it. So I want to thank you, Al-Anon. I want to thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing, and thank you for always saying this is a family disease, because that's what the deal is. It's about about the family. A while ago, I was doing a training up in Alaska for some youth. They flew a bunch of kids in from the various villages, and they wanted me to work with them a couple of days, and so I was. And at the end of the first day, just before we shut down for the day, one of the kids stood up and he said his name, and he was from the Eagle clan. And then he said, all the Eagles stand up. So they have primarily 2 major clans, the Raven clan and the Eagle clan. So by half this kid stood up, and then this young guy, he summarized what I said that day. I thought that was kind of cool. And he sat down, and then the girls stood up. All the Ravens stand up. They stood up. And then she summarized what she heard that day, and then they all sat down, and we closed for the day. And it wasn't on the agenda for that to happen. And so I was having dinner with the sponsor for that group, and I said, what was that about? I said, why did those kids do that? And she said, the reason for that is they've been taught this. It's the way it was in our villages a long, long, long time ago. She said, they wanted you to know that your words didn't fall to the ground. That's why and I thought, boy, what a respectful thing to do for young kids. Well, any guidance or nudging, they knew that that's what they were supposed to do. So that was just a good lesson. So doing one of these sharing things up here is, I have nothing new to tell you that you don't already know. I can't think of anything. I wish I did. That'd be good. But I'm going to tell you, I want you to know that what you taught me, the words didn't fall to the ground. So I'm going to tell you just back what you told me. And so it's worked for quite a while, so thank you for telling me that, and that's, I think, what this program is about. So thought I would share with you from the spiritual way how AA got started. And a long time ago in one of our villages, the people had this knowledge of how to get along, men, how to treat the women, how to raise family, how to raise kids, how to solve conflict. They knew all of this. And it was called wisdom. And so they had 3 elders. They were the wisdom keeper. They was to monitor that community to make sure that they use that wisdom properly. And so as time went on, things seemed to change, and the people started drifting a little bit. And all of a sudden they was more concerned with money, making changes and attending things and ignoring kids, and they just started to drift off. And the elders called them together and they said, "You're not on track no more. You've drifted off. You need to come back to those old ways." And they kind of brushed the elders off, and a little more time went on, and pretty soon they started fighting among themselves, and the men started slapping women around, and they were hurting the kids, and divorce came in, and started drinking and drugging, and all that stuff was going on. So the elders gathered them together again, and this time they were stern. They said, "You're misusing this wisdom." They said, You're way, way, way off track." And they responded, they said, "Oh, you're just old people. You don't understand. There's new times now. We got Google and we got all this stuff, you don't understand. We're different than those old days." And so the elders tried to talk to them, and the people just was resisting. So the elders got together and they said, all right. They said they're not going to turn around. So they said, tonight when they're sleeping, we're going to go to all of them during the night, and we're going to take that wisdom away from them. And we're going to gather that wisdom, we're going to put it in a box. And we can't have them misusing it. And so then, that night they did. They went and all while they were sleeping, they took this knowledge away on how they were supposed to be. So then they put this in the box, and the elders, they talked, and they said, okay, we got to hide this wisdom. We got to hide it somewhere, because when they find out what it's like to live without it, they're going to drink more, they're going to party more, they're going to find Google and Netflix and self-help books, and they're going to find all these ways, to get it together. So the first elder said, I know in Arizona there's this mountain there, and he said, on top there's a cave. He said, let's take this box and we'll hide it up there and not tell them, and then someday when they're ready, we'll give it back to them. Another two said, no, he said, they're always snooping around, and they got mountain bikes, and they're always going in caves trying to take pictures, and that's not a good idea. So they walked in a circle for a while again, and the other one said, there's this lake in Minnesota. He said, it's really, really deep. He said, we'll take this box, put some rocks on it, and we'll sink it down way to the bottom. And the other two, they thought about that, and they said, no, they got fish finders and radars, and they'll find it and bring it back up and give it to misuse. So they walked in a circle for a long time, and the third elder said, someday when the people are ready, he said, someday we're going to give this back to them. And he said, so the only thing that I can think of where we can hide it where they won't look is we'll hide it inside of themselves. And so that night they went and they hid all the wisdom back inside of them, and they didn't even know it. And so they said, that's where we're going to hide it. Someday we're going to tell them. And so as time went on, the people got enough. They started to surrender, and they started to pray to God for help. They said, I really need some help. They weren't turning to money no more, Google no more. They was turning to prayer. And so the elders had this ceremony, and they asked the Creator, they said, is it time to tell us people where this knowledge is? And the Creator said, yep, it's time to tell them. And he said, but we're going to have to make it simple. He said, let's give them 12 steps in order that if they do those 12 steps, what they will learn is that wisdom is inside of themselves. And that's how AA got started. Because isn't it true? They teach us where it is we got to look, and it's not on Google. It's not outside. It's within ourselves. And we are changing the world. There's not many organizations or people, anybody does it like how this crazy program does. And we have these meetings, and I don't know how everything gets paid for, but somehow it does, and we end up pretty close to breaking even and chipping in and helping one another, and then it just starts going like that. So I just thought I would share that with you, is how powerful this program is. It was given because we're ready. We're ready to surrender. We're ready to do the deal and not look elsewhere, for things. So what I usually like to do in these things is the elders always say, when you get started, they say, the most important thing to do is to take the time to connect with each other. And what that means is this, is in the spiritual world, this happens, but it's about that netashneya, is that we have the ability to put that feeling, so we all connect so that we're like one mind. Isn't this weekend kind of been like that? You could just feel this connectedness, and it's not anything anyone did. You just go, whoa, I feel like I belong here. I feel a part of. Even the newcomers, you'll say, they'll be using your language. I'm having this experience, they'll they talk like that. And so how we take this thing to connect is, first I put down these 4 colors: red, yellow, black, and white. And that's to remind us that this is an EEO disease. What the elders tell us is that when we see these colors like this, is that we are in this time, this wisdom that come back that we know, is we'll start to realize that the Creator didn't make 4 races. Somebody started telling us there's 4 races, and they walk around believing it. And he said, no, there's not 4 races, it's just one. The human race. And what they said is that when we are in the womb, that in there is where the Creator comes and He gives us what they call our earth suit. So some suits are red, some are yellow, some are black, some are white. And then we're born and we walk around with this suit on. This is not who I am. This isn't Indian. That color of my skin, that's not what it is. Got to look inside. So they said in this time, what we would do is we would come together and we look past the earth suit. I could look past your suit and see right inside of you. And I say, you love your children like I love my children. Or you love this just how I love this. We start to see this connectedness. And so how we do that is we do that with the plant. In this case, we use this little sage. Because we believe that every plant has a medicine. We say that the Creator is in all things. So each plant has a way that the Creator demonstrates a certain healing property that if we take it and use it right, then we can heal from that. This particular plant, what it allows is it allows this connectedness, this feeling of connectedness will spread. And so each plant, you have to know how to get the medicine out. Some of it you soak in water, some you grind it up. This particular plant, you set it on fire. And so I'm going to light just a very small part of this plant. And this is you got to have a respect between tradition and technology. Whatever that is. So we've got to be respectful that way, so we're going to only light just a little bit, but our medicine is so strong that it doesn't take much. This medicine is very, very powerful. We use this on 5th steps. We use it right in inventory. We use it in making amends, many ways that you want that calmness. And so I'll light this medicine. And then when the smoke comes out, then what I'll do is I will catch the medicine on the eagle feather. And so it will stick to this feather like this. And then I can take this feather and I can throw it. And that medicine will go a real long distance. Almost no time. From the time it's on there, you have it here, it's back there. Simultaneously at that same time. And so I'm going to light just a little bit of medicine. And it comes out in the smoke. And you put it on the eagle feather. An eagle feather is like a satellite dish. It has a send side, a receive side. So depending upon how you are using it in a ceremony, depends upon the direction in which you hold it. So in this case, I'm going to send it. So I will put the medicine on the fan on the send side, and then you throw it a great distance like this. And that's how we then connect to be like one mind. Because I think this is why the steps says that we. It's not an I program, it's a connectedness program. We together have done this, have done that. And then the eagle feather to us would be like how Christians would have a Bible. So they say, put your hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, and then you make a swear to tell the truth. What we do is we use the eagle feather. We didn't have a Bible. So we use the eagle feather. So when you have one of these, you're not supposed to lie. You've got to tell the truth, just in its presence. So I'm going to just keep it out here because I'm going to tell my story and... You never know about how that is. So I'm going to share it. I'm going to just tell you what what you guys told me. And to share my experience drinking hope. That's what you said. To tell that story. And I know a lot about it because other than the blackouts, I was there. So I remember some of it's hearsay that people told me what I did, so I kind of, believe them. It probably happened that way. So I think the best way I can tell you a story is to tell you this story. Some of you might know Don Pritz. I had three major people took me through their work in the early days. One is Frank McKibben. He was an attorney, very big guy. And I call him my head sponsor. And then the next one that took me through the work was Don Pritz, and he was my heart sponsor. Him and Frank didn't always get along in the same meeting. But they was, because sometimes our head and hearts, they have different opinions about what's going on. And then later on, I met a native sponsor. His name was Johnny Looking Cloud. And here's the one that showed me how all this time I thought this was a white man's program. And when Johnny Looking Cloud showed me, he said it's not what it is. The only thing he helped me to do was to, instead of having the steps in a line down like this, I was to take the steps and put them in a circle. And when I started doing that, that made sense to me. Just something inside opened up or whatever that it seemed very natural on what was going on with these 12 steps. So I was not sober my first attempt at AA. I slipped 7 times coming in. And I just could not catch on to what the heck was going on here. And I bought that big book, and there's supposed to be instructions in there. I could never find no place that was instructions in there. In fact, it was the most boring book I ever had to read, and you guys are, the big book says this, page 80, whatever. You're quoting that thing, and then sometimes it was confusing Because what I found out, the way that those 12 steps are, they're very simple. But then I've been to meetings where they have analysis paralysis. They talk about this thing and explain every little detail of the molecules that hook to the acceptance, and they roll down this plank and hit this little cup and it rolls this way, and then I have an experience and whatever. So I was kind of taught to do things as just simple. When it says to write, just write. You don't have to know why, just write. And when it says fifth step between you and God and another person, you have to analyze. Just do it. Just go read it. Get you some coffee and just read it. So that's kind of how I was brought into this program. So one night I had slipped again, and I had lost my family. I could not. I was dying from this stuff, and I knew it. You guys, you hear that insanity of not being able to quit. Only you guys would understand how that is. Other people, they don't understand that. So anyway, this guy come to me and he said, "Hey, there's this Indian guy up in Estes Park outside of Colorado, outside Denver." He said, "Why don't we go up there and we'll listen to him? You're not doing nothing." So I went up there, and I walked in that room, and who's sitting by the table is Don Pritz. And first thing I noticed, he had this big book, and it was dirty and ripped apart and rubber banded, and jeez, you could tell he must have been studying it for sure, or using it for something. And the other thing I noticed about him, he had the bluest eyes that I ever seen on a human being. He just had his blue eyes, and we looked at one another like this and went shoo, and we connected, and it never did disconnect ever. Even though when he passed on some years later, his wife asked me if I would do his traveling song. And in our culture, when somebody dies, we have this song that we sing. And then the ancestors on the other side, when they hear that song, you go, "Oh, a relative is coming." So they come to the edge and help that person go to the other side. So at his funeral, I had the honor of singing his traveling song, for him. But that night, I sat there and he told a story, and somehow, all of a sudden, it was like all my whatever cracked open, and I understood what was going on. It's just a darn story. And then he said I could use this story, because usually in our culture, if somebody gives you a song, you don't pretend that song is yours. You have to say, "This song was given to me by," and then you say where it originated from, because sometimes God gives that song to a person, and then they're able to spread it on. So I have permission for this story. It wasn't mine, but it was at this gathering in Estes Park. And how it goes is there was this boxing ring, and there was a boxing match, and in one corner was alcohol in the black trunks, and I was in the other corner with the white trunks. And people were coming in, filling the seats, buying popcorn, hot dogs, and those kind of events, they have a reserved on the very first row. That's reserved for your family. So your family gets the best view, no blockages. They can see right up front what's going on. So my family came in and they filed in there and they all sit down there, and referee called us out. She said, "There's some rules in when you do this," and he's talking about hitting below the belt, and when I say break, and he was explaining all the rules, and me and the alcohol, we connected. So anyway, we went and sat down in the corner, and I looked over at alcohol, and it looked at me, and went, shoo. I had a friend. I could just tell. There was something about that, what was sitting over there, I was really attracted to. And the touch, anyhow, was very, very strong. So we got out there, and we was boxing around, and there's no big deal. First couple of rounds, and then about the third round or so, I must have just ducked the wrong way, and boy, he just hit me really hard, and it stung. And I was jolted by what it did. And I looked at him and he said, that was just a lucky punch, you can whip me. And I restored my confidence. I knew that what he'd said was the truth. And so, as time went on, got to around 5, 6, and 7, all of a sudden he's sneaking them in more and he's hitting below the belt and I look at the referee and say nothing. It's fighting unfair. So by then my eyes is getting bloodied shut and I'm just hurting all over and and he had this smile on his face, very attractive. And I guess how Lyle would say, how I looked at alcohol, I thought, he's hot. So anyway, I come and I sit down after those rounds and I realized I had to start developing a strategy because I was getting hurt pretty bad there. So I'm sitting there thinking about what I could do, and pretty soon I felt this tug on my arm. And I looked down there to see what's doing it, and it was my son. And he said, Dad, he said, Mom says to tell you, let's climb down and let's just all go home. He said, you're getting beat up pretty bad. He said, just come on down, and he said, we'll just all walk out and we'll go home. And I looked at alcohol and I looked at him and I said, son, I want you to go back and you tell the family to watch. I'm going to just do one more round. And I know some moves that the alcohol doesn't know that I can do. I said, just go back there and you tell them that. And so he went back, he sat down, I got out there, and this time alcohol put me right to my knees. I couldn't even stand up no more. Kicking and punching, and I'm on my hands and knees trying to swing at him to do something, and the bell rung, and I crawl back onto that chair, and I sit there, and I just really trying to think what was going on there, and pretty soon I felt this tug on my arm again. And I looked down there, and this time it was my daughter, Morning Star. She said, Dad, she says, please come on down. She says, Mama says to tell you that we're going to go. We're not watching it no more. We want you to come with us. But we're not watching this no more. We're going to leave. And I looked at her and I said, you tell the family, you tell your mama, there's one Indian trick I've never ever used in public, but I'm going to do it this time. So the bell rung, I got out there, and this time my face is on the canvas. I couldn't even hardly move. And I don't remember during that round when they left, but they did. They walked out of that place, and it was just me and alcohol, and I looked around. There was nobody in the audience anymore. They'd all left because they saw what was going on there. So I had this moment of clarity. So I climbed out of there and I went home, and I woke up and I said, boy, you got some work to do. So I went down to Barnes and Nobles and I got me a self-help book, and I got me some flute music, and I got me a candle, and I said, I'm going to eat some lettuce and get myself together, exercise a little bit. So I went and I started doing that, and it helped. I was improving. And then one day I got to thinking about another move I could make. So I went down to the arena to see if alcohol was even around anymore, and there he's standing on his ropes. Alcohol, I'm back. I knew you would be. And so as I went to approach that arena, the boxing ring, didn't he let me in? He just kicked me in the face as I was trying to get in, and jumped over the rope and just stomped me down. And it didn't take no 12 rounds. It happened in 2 minutes. It was right back. So I crawled out of there again, and I just couldn't believe what was going on. And so I thought about it, and I said, you went to the wrong bookstore. That's what happened. So I go to a different bookstore, get a different book, different smelling candles, new music, and I come back and some lettuce, and went back after I started feeling better, alcohol and back. So I knew you would be. And so I started down that aisle, and somehow he just appeared, and he just done me right there in the middle of the aisle there. I didn't get near the arena. And so I had another moment of clarity, and that was on August 10th, 1978. I left that arena. I know alcohol is still there, and I left there, and I come to you guys. I come to AA. And I didn't know a lot about AA. I just knew it was about alcohol and that sort of thing. So I went and I scoped out this meeting in Colorado Springs and on Tejon Street. And there they park at a diagonal. And so I went and I knew where the meeting was. I went in the afternoon, didn't tell nobody I was going. And when I went down to that meeting, there was a slot right in front of that door where I was supposed to go in. So I stopped my car and I said, I'm going to go around the block. And if I go around the block and that slot is still there, it means I'm supposed to go in. It's a sign. So I went around the block and I come back and they're all parking on the other side of the street. That slot was still empty. So I said to myself, okay, I'm going to go around the block one more time. And then if it's empty, I'll go in there. So I had my foot on the brake all the way around that block, going slow as that darn res car I had would go. And sure enough, it was empty. So I pulled in there and I went upstairs to that meeting. And I peeked in that doorway to see what was in there. In my reaction, I says, oh my God, it's all white men in here. I couldn't believe that's all it was, is just white men in there. And I thought, what in the hell are they going to teach me, these guys? So I started to leave, and they had a greeter there. And it seemed like magically I had a cup of coffee in my hand, and he took this hook around my neck, and he went, and just slid me right into the chair, you know. And I was too embarrassed to get out and leave, so I said, you know something? I said, I'm not saying nothing. That's what I'm going to do. I can't leave, but I ain't telling him anything. So it come my turn to introduce myself, and I didn't say nothing. So finally, the next guy, he picked up on it, and they went. So that meeting, I don't remember any content. I don't remember what was said. What I do remember was, one is they were telling on themselves. I'm selfish and I'm judgmental, and I thought, you got to be kidding. Why are you talking like that? Where I come from, you didn't talk shit like that. That was not healthy, you know. You had your different type of deal going on. The other thing just irritated the crap out of me is they laughed. There was always not like he, belly laugh about it. And there was nothing funny about anything that I could tell, you know. But there was one thing when I left there that I remembered about that meeting is there was a feeling in there. And I hadn't felt that feeling ever before that I knew. And I couldn't even explain what it was. My mind couldn't grasp what was going on there. Only thing I knew was that feeling didn't go away, and I wanted to go and feel it again. Whatever the hell it was, among those white guys sitting there, there was something else going on. So I went back there. And I was there long enough that I learned that I was to get a sponsor. And that's not unforeign in our native culture, because often we always have an elder guiding us. So that concept of guidance was not unfamiliar. So I watched this one guy, and you'd hear in the meetings, if you want what we have, and for the most part, I didn't want any of the shit that most of them had. But they would say that, but I didn't want none of that crap, you know, that they were doing. And but he seemed like an elder. He always told the truth that I could tell. He was very direct, and I kind of like that. And He was about 6'6", very, very tall. There's no doubt that he was an alcoholic. His face was scarred up. He used to fight a lot when he was drinking. And I think when he was a baby, somebody hit him with an ugly stick because he was just, he was not pretty. And so anyway, I asked him if he'd sponsor me. And so we sat down and had a cup of coffee, and he was an attorney. And so he had this sarcasm or something about him, like he could look you up and down like this with his eye, and he'd just like roll his eyes and just shake his head, like verbal, nonverbal disapproval or something. And so anyway, we were talking there, and he said, I've been in his room 17 years, and he said, I watch you Indians come and go. He said, you guys all sit in the back row. He said, you never sit up for all you Indians, you all sit in the back row. And he said, I think you all have been given the same name. He says, when it comes your time to talk, it's I pass, I pass, I pass, I pass. So he's getting like sarcastic, about that. And then he went on, he'd say, I saw one of you guys stay here 90 days one time. He said, I remember that guy stayed around for 3 months. He said, but most of you don't make it. He said, you don't understand what's going on here. He said, you guys are really weird. And I don't know if you've ever been a kid and your parents bought your little puppy. You play with that puppy, but you want it to growl and you kind of like rub his face. That's what I felt he was doing. You guys sit in the back and you don't get it. And he was talking, like that. And I remember other things he was saying. I was getting very, very irritated. And I remember my head was down, but I looked him up and I looked him right in the eye, and I thought, you white son of a bitch, I'll show you, I'll get this program. You just tell me what it is I'm supposed to do, I didn't say it out loud, but that was my innermost thought about him. But I found out later on, his skill as a sponsor was, he knew the only thing he had to work with was my anger. I was such an angry person, and he knew if he could just keep me pissed off, but not highly pissed, but there was a zone that he could keep me in, or I wouldn't quit, and yet I'd have the energy to do the work. So then, next thing he said was, he got kind of excited, and he said, I decided right now I'm just going to be your friend for the rest of your life. Just out of the clear blue. And I looked at him like, why would I want to be friends with a white guy like that, and he said, it's got nothing to do whether you like me or not. He said, I decided I am going to be your friend no matter what. And he got like just this silly happy or something, and he said, I decided I'm going to help you. And he said, I'll tell you some things I'm not. He said, I'm not your hotel. So you're not staying in my place, don't even think about it. I ain't your banker. I ain't lending you no money. And I ain't your taxi cab. Get your meetings, you got to the bar, get the meetings, he said, and he talked like that. But he said, there's one thing I can give you. And he pulled out this big book and he said, the thing that I can give you is, he said, I know how to stay sober and you don't. He said, I know how to stay sober and you little brown son of a bitch, you don't even have any idea how to do that. That's how he talked to me, and he just was kind of that way. So then he opened up that big book and he turned to the page where the 12 steps were. And he said, I want you to look at these 12 steps one at a time, and then you've got to answer 2 questions that I'm going to give you. You've got to read step 1, then you say, do I want to do this step? Second question was, if I want to do this step, am I willing to go to any length to do the work in this step? That was a 2. So I had to read step 1, answer step 2, all the way down, all 12, until I come back and tell him I want to do it, and I'm willing to go to any length. And when he was explaining this to me, I was having lunch, and by then he knew I kind of like peanut butter sandwiches. And so as he's making lunch, he's telling me about this. He said, AA is like a banquet, he said. Way down on this side, he says, like steak and lobster, way down there if you do the work. And then if you just mess with it, there's like meatloaf. And then he'd come back, and there's bologna sandwiches. And he'd come back and he said, way on this end, he said, this is peanut butter sobriety. And here I'm eating this damn peanut butter sandwiches, And it's just like he's rubbing his, face in. So anyway, he gave me a schedule for meetings in Denver. And he said, you need to go to 6 meetings a week. Sunday you can choose whatever one you want or choose not to go. But I will circle the meetings that you're to attend. There's a big book, Traditions. There's one meeting where all the old guys were. They had been going to that meeting so long that they had their own chair. Like you come in and you sit in a chair. That's Jim's chair. Get out of there. Throw one at, excuse me, Dang, so. And they just did the same old stuff to me. They didn't know nothing about staying sober. And so then he said, you go to these meetings, you tell him your name's Don, you're alcoholic, and then he says, shut up. He said, don't share. He said, you got nothing of any value is going to help anybody until you take a third step. Once you take third step, then you can share. And so AA is a small community, so everybody figures out who your sponsor is, and he can't share. So they try to get me to say something, and so I didn't. And but I was at this one meeting I was to go to. It was a place called Eagle Lodge, and it was known to be a very kind of a big book group was going on there. And so I'm sitting in there, and people are coming into the meeting, and this Indian woman walked in there, sat right across the table from me. I looked up at her, and our feelings went shoo. Boy, that connectedness was right there, and I went, "Oh man, this is way too cool." And so then I got thinking. I said, "I can't just say my name's Don. I'm alcoholic. That's not going to get me nowhere with this person." So as my time's going around, I started to remember what I heard in meetings about page 86 and page 124 and whatever. So I was just ripping off all the stuff I knew about that big book, and man, her smile got big. She knew she snagged a good one. And so I went for coffee. That was good. And we had this chat. And I had a little bitty apartment in the south side of Denver, and when I was coming back home and I was walking down that sidewalk to get to I felt like John Travolta. That coffee and, I was just like, just, I felt hot, that's how I felt. And, but anyway, as I'm unlocking the door, phone's ringing. And I said, she couldn't even wait. She wants me. I could tell that how it was, and so I got in there and answer the phone, being like a stupid hello. And guess who it was? Frank. What are you doing? Moving your lips. Sponsors are like the internet. They're just everywhere. They don't miss nothing, no matter where you go. But anyway, he took me through that work, and we started. And so I was to read the first 43 pages for the first half of step 1. And then he showed me this instruction on page 52, 9 areas I was to look at in terms of unmanageability. And what he had me do was, I use a system called mind mapping. It's a way of taking notes. And so I had to create 9 little mini visions, 9 little mini things looking at personal relationships. So I put like my mom, my wife, my kids. Then I had to look at how are you treating them. And as I went around, I started to add some names to it. And what became very evident to me is I didn't get along with no one. There was no one on her I didn't try to con, lie, manipulate, selfish, fix blame, give a silent treatment. And I went, oh my God, this unmanageability. Then I had to do that, making relationships and emotional nature and making a living. I had to do this 9 little areas in that step 1. And so then, how he explained it to me is he said, the steps are interconnected. These are not separated by numbers. They're all connected with each other. So when I got done with that, I had to bring those 9 areas to step 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could make sanity in my relationships. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could show me how to manage my emotional nature. Came to believe that a power could. So I had to make 9 little mini visions of what it would look like. How would my relationships look like if God was running it? And it seemed like a lie. I'd be loving, I'd be truthful, I'd be kind. I never had any of that. That was not my experience, It was another thing, but I had to put it there. And when I got that done, then he explained to me, he said, step 2, set your intent for step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. That's what you're going to get. If you want a sneak preview of what a spiritual awakening is, you just did it. And then there's 2 things will be added to it. One is the fear inventory. What would God have me be? In the 6th inventory, how should my behavior have been? That would be my spiritual awakening in step 12. So I went ahead and I did that. Then I had to come to step 3, which was a problem for me initially. I was raised on a reservation in Wisconsin. And they had a church there. So the missionaries are always coming there and doing the deal, And so our parents would drop us off because you always got clothes and you got food or watermelon or whatever from the missionaries. But you had to hear the pitch first. You had to go to the church and then hear all that stuff and then you get what you went there for. And so each of them had a certain habit or something that they identified with. So one of them would come in there and they'd all be going, and so all the little Indian kids were all doing like this, how we were taught. And then pretty soon they'd run out of money and they'd move out and they'd stay blank a month or so. And then a new one would come in and they'd say, those ones are all going to hell. Are you lucky we showed up? So you could not do this anymore, but you had to go like this, And a Catholic, a nun, to a little Indian kid, there's some scary stuff going on there. Because in those days they had those robes, those habits. And they got rulers up the sleeve and, things like that. And they patrol. When they're always scared. And they were trying to lead us to find God. And they'd say things like, as I remember it, they'd say things like, you ever been burnt with a cigarette? Well, your whole body is just full of little burns from the top of your head to your toe. That's how hell is. Do you want to seek God? And you go, yes, sister, I do. I want to seek God. And then a little while later they say, oh, and by the way, there ain't no water in hell. And you're going to be blisters and there's going to be this no water ever. Do you want to seek God? And you go, yes, sister, I do. It was like they had the flames of hell licking your ass to find God. That's how it seemed to me, And then I come to you guys and you're saying, oh, by the way, you got to turn your life over to God. And now, whoever put those words, God as you understand Him, thank you for that. Because that made a huge difference. And so I was trying to find that thing out, but I just thought, I know where my elbow is, I know where my eyebrow is, I don't know where the will is. Where the hell is that? And then you guys, I was listening to you, and I go to one meeting and it'd be on, well, I turned my will over to God, and I took it back. Then I turned it over, and then I loaned it to somebody, and then I took it back, and I loaned it, and then I made it, I was going, well, how does this step work when you turning it over and taking it back? And everybody was saying it. That's how it seemed to me. And then the thing that clinched it for me was I was in York Street in Denver. And this guy from California come out there, and he was searched that meeting, and a lot of you know this story already, but it's a story about the frog. And he said there was 4 frogs sitting on the log. One of those frogs decided to jump in the water, in the pond. How many is left? I said 3. He said, no, 4. He said that one frog, different from the other 3, decided to jump but didn't. The thing is, when it makes that decision, he said, then God turns that into an orange frog. So now you got 3 green frogs, 1 orange frog that decided to ask God to take his will in his activities. And all of a sudden I went, oh. And then he went on to say, he says, supposing you take the 3rd step on Wednesday and then Friday you get all pissed off at somebody. He said, that doesn't mean you took your will back, it just means you're a pissed off orange frog. And I went, oh, yeah, I understand. Now I get it, what's going on there. So I found out it had nothing to do with what was going on with me emotionally, that decision that I made was a permanent one. It was, so then I said, well, what happens on the following Monday if you get drunk? He said, well, then you're just a drunk orange frog. So somehow that made sense to me. So I come back to Frank, and I was all excited, and I said, Frank, I said, I heard this story about the orange frog, and I want to turn my life, my will over to care of God. And he would just like stare, his mouth would be open, and he'd say, all right. And he's just getting his stuff ready, he'd say, I'm just really getting tired of this Indian shit, but if you want to be a frog, let's go ahead and get on our knees and we'll do it. So we did. And so by the time I left there, he was showing me how to write a 5-column resentment inventory, 4 columns for fear, and 11 columns for sex inventory. I had to separate dishonesty from jealousy to see the patterns a lot better. And so I was very carefully coached about the dark crannies I had to tell all. And I had stuff in there. I think the first hardest thing that I had to deal with in that inventory one night, I'm sitting there writing, and what came up was sexual abuse. On the res, when I was 9, I was sexually abused by an uncle for close to 3 years. And that was a secret. And they have a way of making sure a little kid, you don't tell nobody. And so he would come over to the house, and I would jump in bed and start coughing, make him believe I was sick. And my mother would say, you lazy thing, you get out there and you help him get grandma's wood. And so we'd go out there and it would happen again, And then one night, they had a big beer party on the reservation, and a fight broke out, and somebody emptied a pistol on him, shot him 6 times right in the chest. And I remember how happy I was. I went like, yes. And then that was my mother's most favorite brother. And when I saw how she went through grieving and mourning, I always felt guilty about feeling good about how she felt, because I didn't feel the same way. And so I had those things in there, and when it was done, I had everything on there. There was nothing that I left out. Jail time, cops time, thousands of dollars and money that I took and stole and all that kind of stuff, and falsified expense reports with the company I was working for, and all that went on. Then later on, I found out that there's other ways to use inventory that really helped me. One was, I used to think, how come the same damn character defects is showing up again on the inventory again? Everyone, there it is again, there it is again, there it is again. And so I was in a meeting somewhere, and I went for coffee with a guy, and he told me, he said, this is what I do that helps me with the inventory. He said he does his inventory, and when it's done, he said, then I take the character defect and I bring that to the first column. So let's just say what shows up in my inventory is jealousy. Just say it's that. So I take jealousy and I put that in the first column. And then in the second column I put, this is what it does to me. And then this is how I'm affected. Does it hurt, threaten, or interfere with my self-esteem, personal relationships, sex relations, ambitions, fear, money? And I found out then that will trigger something. Because I found out character defects don't work single, they work in teams. That's why they're so hard to catch. And I found out there are 5 fears behind when I was working jealousy. It wasn't just one thing. It could be a combination of 2 different things where I could see 5 fears would show up by the time I got done looking at how that would be. So I started to get really some clarity to find out behind every character defect is 1 or more fear. And all that time I was asking God to remove the symptom. And now when I ask in step 6 and 7 to remove the fear, it's removing the cause. And it was just very, very helpful later on when I got that kind of a clarity to it. So then I went on and I did step 6 and 7. And how I do that is I cut a little piece of red cloth, maybe 3 inches square. And then I take tobacco and I put in that cloth. It's called a tobacco tie. And I put that in there. While I'm making it, I'm asking God, I'm looking at, am I willing to have God remove this defective character? And then I tie that tobacco tie with a little string or yarn. And so I make a tobacco tie for each defective character that's in my inventory, and I have them like in a little bowl. Then the first time I did it, I went in a sweat lodge where there's hot rocks in the lodge. And then I brought the people in to sing the really old songs. And so I'm in the sweat lodge and they're singing these old songs. So I take one of these tobacco ties and I tell the Creator, I'm ready to have you take this. And I put that tobacco tie on those hot rocks. And they'll sit there for a second or 2 and then it goes, shoo, just bursts into flames. And it just does something to you. I don't always do the sweat lodge. Sometimes I build me some type of a fire container and I put the rocks or whatever is in there. And it's such a relief. I remember by the time I did 6 of those, every time I just watch it burst into the flame like that, I just wanted to take the whole bowl and just dump it. I said, let's just do this, take it all. I'm ready to do that. But I was told no, one at a time. That's how I had to do that. And so I went ahead and I found out my steps for steps 8 and 9. That was in the inventory also. And so when I reviewed the time I was working with Johnny Looking Cloud, I reviewed that and he said, I don't think that this list is complete. I don't think you have it all. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, have you ever hurt the Mother Earth? Have you put garbage out there? Did you misuse? Did you put stuff you shouldn't have in the water? And it was just like, I went, oh my God, no, I didn't. And he said, that's what you need to add to make your amends. He said, you did a lot of damage to the earth. And then I had to look at hunting, and I had to look at gaming and stuff that I did. I was raised by my grandpa, and that's what we did. We were subsistence. We hunted for our food and everything. So now I hunt when that food is given to an elder or to a family. I don't do it for sport no more. I do it if I get something, or somebody will say, hey, can you come up to the res and get a deer for the elders for the winter? Then I go there, and I can do that. I know how to do that very, very well. But that this kind of changes, things. And I remember we got to this part of the sexual abuse and that sort of thing. And when it come to this uncle, he was dead. And it come to working to amend. My honest prayer was to the Creator, I said, bring him back for 15 minutes. I ain't a little boy no more. I said, then I'll forgive him. I said, but you bring the son of a bitch back and just let him have a man-to-man chat. And of course that didn't happen. So I had to deal with this issue around forgiveness. And so Johnny Looking Cloud, he said, well, there's 4 directions to forgiveness. And he said, the first one is in the east. And that's like when you bump into somebody, a light one. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. It's a light one. Then you go to the south in the circle, and that forgiveness is one called forgiving the unforgivable. That could be like domestic violence, it could be rape, sexual abuse, or there's really, really tough ones. Somebody lied or whatever. Then they get harder. Then you go around the circle on the west. There's a type of forgiveness. It's forgiving yourself. Any of you ever just do something just stupid when you were drunk and then you wake up the next morning? It's not reversible. The damage is done. It's happening. And sometimes that forgiving yourself is harder even than forgiving the unforgivable. And then there's one in the north. That's where you forgive someone to set their spirit free. You don't have to, but you should set their spirit free. That's like you go to the grocery store and they walk down the aisle and they see you, they turn and go the other way because they can't bear what they've done. So that type is to set the forgiveness for that. And so when I tried to work on that forgiving the unforgivable, I asked him for help, and he said, okay, he said, I'll help you. He said, there's 3 things to do to forgive the unforgivable. 2 of them you can do, 1 of them you can't. And I'm going, but he didn't do that way. He wouldn't tell you the whole picture. He's like an old Indian guy, and he wouldn't do it like how you wanted. He just tell you this. So he said, okay, I'm going to tell you through the 3 things, one at a time. I'll tell you the first one, and then it's going to take 30 days for you to come 1 cycle of the moon, 28 days for you to come to terms with it. He said, first of all, in order for you to forgive the unforgivable, you got to be able to admit where it's happened. And I said, well, I started explaining on the Res by Hymns Rock and all these places that stuff was going on, and he said, no. He said, where it happened is in your head, in there. I said, no, you don't understand. I said, it really was up in Wisconsin, and he said, that's not where it's going on. He said, it's in your head. And I was just getting irritated at him because I couldn't get across to him where it happened. What was going on? It was up there, but he said, no, it's in here. So after about a couple of weeks of working through resentments and all that self-talk about this old Indian guy, I finally said, oh, I get it. I understand what he's saying. It's in here. So I come back to him and I give him some tobacco, and he was satisfied with my answer. And then so he said, okay, the second thing is he said, in there now, there is a story about what went on. And he said, and you're the author. You wrote the story. I said, no. I said, this is what the son of a bitch did. And I was describing to him all the things that went on with that. And he said, you're the author. In here, that you're the one who wrote that story. And he said, I think you even added to it. And then that really got me upset, because he was guessing right, but I had added to it and all sorts of things. So another 30 days, he wouldn't even talk to me until all of a sudden I said, okay, I got it. I said, it's in there, and I said, it's a story. So then he said, now the third one you can't do. He said, so what I'll tell you is, he said, I want you to, he went in, he said, I want you to take this altar. So he called this the altar. Took those 4 colors, and then he had a shell. But in there he had a mixture of cedar, sweetgrass, and sage. He made like a special medicine, and he said, you to go up on Rampart Range, that was a place that he and I did some ceremonies. He said, you know that place? I said, yeah. He said, go up there. He said, take this altar up there. And he said, you're to talk to the Creator, and you've got to tell him you did step 1, you did step 2. And then he said, what you got to do is you got to ask, and he said, just specifically these words. Don't make up your own words. You don't ask God. You don't ask Sankashala. You don't ask all those Indian names. You got to say Holy Spirit. He said, it's a special helper. That he said, you don't understand, but he said, you just listen to me. He said, ask the Holy Spirit to give you a new story. To give you the story of healing and of forgiveness. He said, you can't do it. You don't know how. You can't even go to another human. They can't tell you. Only the Holy Spirit can tell you how to do that. And I was kind of new in recovery, and so I went up there to there, and I wasn't good at praying. So finally, I just took off my hat and I said, okay. Johnny looking called told me I'm supposed to come up here and build an altar. There it is. It was like that. And then he said that the thing that we're doing up here is in my head, and I got it. It's there. I understand that's what the story is contained. And I said, I almost fully agree that I wrote the story. I said, but I'm just telling you what he told me to do. And I said, then he told me I had to use these words specifically. Holy Spirit, can you give me a new story? And that's what happened. I was given a new story to do that. And I did it 18 more times with the hate. I was so full of hate that I would do that ceremony, admit where it was, admit I wrote the story, and ask the Holy Spirit to give me a new story, a new view. And it happened every time. So I learned that from that old man, on how forgiveness worked. So then when we did 10 and 11, I struggled with that some, and getting it going. So I asked him one day, I said, teach me to pray. He said, okay. And it was always adamant that I had to use those things from the page 83, the 11th step morning and during the day. He was very big book oriented in that way. And so he said, I want you to get up at sunrise. And he said, when you first see the sun just appear on the horizon, he said, that means there's a window. And then you pray all until that circle is full. Then the window closes. During that window, he said, birds are starting to sing, dew is melting. There's powers just happening, waking up the whole universe. Then he said, when the sun is way high, you sleep till 10, the power's gone. You got to do it right at sunrise. So I didn't believe that, but I got up and I started to do that 11th step in the morning. And after a couple of weeks, I was out there one morning, and there must have been 40 birds singing, robins and blue jackets. I couldn't. So I called him up and I said, this prayer shit works. I said, you know what happened? I said, my yard is full of birds. They're just singing. And he said, nephew, he said, those birds have been singing every morning. It's not something just started. But I found out that during that time, that way was very, very effective. And so I go through this work every year. I missed 1 year, the year that my sister died. I couldn't do it. We were tight, and so I go through every year, every July. I go through the work, and I do it again. I've learned from him. I do the steps in a circle. 3 steps in the east. That's like a new sun, new day, new beginning. That's you find your relationship with your higher power. Everything's relationships. 4, 5, 6 in the south. That's where you find your relationship with you. You know your strengths and weaknesses. You know that you're not writing the truth about you. In inventory, we're writing the truth about the lie. And that makes it a lot easier to write when you're truthful about what's really going on with that. 7, 8, 9 is in the west. That's when you establish your relatives, your relationships with others. Making amend, you connect. Make amend, you connect. Pretty soon you have connection. And I think in a lot of cases, the opposite of addiction is connection. I think it's building. That's what you get. That's what goes on here. In 10, 11, 12 in the north, that's the elder's wisdom. So I'll close with this prayer. it seems like anything I have of any value, you guys taught me. And I know what that feeling was in that first meeting. It's a feeling of belonging. I come home and I didn't know it. I come home and that feeling was there. That's what it was, but I didn't find it out till much later. So the prayer I'll close with is, it says, God, thank you for what you've given me. And then it says, God, thank you for what you've taken from me. And God, thank you for what you have left me. And what you left me is meetings like Fots and a bunch of people here working this work, finding out where that wisdom was hid. Not everybody knows it. A lot of churches don't know it. A lot of people don't know what those steps teach us, where that wisdom was hid many, many years ago. It's hidden inside of ourselves. So thank you very much.